All right, thank you for that, Laura. Um, okay, we are going to get started. I'm sure that we will have folks continue to filter in as we go, but we've got a lot to get through this morning. So let's dive right in. Good morning, everybody. My name is Erica Smitka, and I'm the Deputy Director of the New York State League of Women Voters. Thank you so much for joining us this weekend. The focus of this webinar is going to be on how you can take action in state advocacy. It's to let you know about some of the hot button issues that we expect to see come up this session. And then it's also to introduce you to several people without whom the State League staff could not do all of the work that we do. So I'm going to start by first talking about the logistics of how we lobby on the state level. I will then introduce our issue specialists who will talk to you about their topic area. And then we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end. So on the call with us today, we have our 8 issue specialists and state staff. We have Laura Bierman, who's the Executive Director of the New York State League, Nancy Rosenthal, who is the President of the New York State League. And I believe we also have Michelle Lamberti on with us, who is a New York State board member who is a part of our issues and advocacy team. Due to a scheduling conflict, unfortunately, Sally Robinson, who is the Vice President for Issues and Advocacy, was unable to join us this morning, but I am sure she is thinking of us. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Sally after the webinar. And as I said, we've got our 8 issue specialists here with us today. So they will talk to you a lot more in detail about their own topic, but I'll just do a brief introduction of each issue specialist and the topic area that they focus on. So we have with us Kate Doran, who works on election law. We have Beth Radow, who works on the environment. I'll be standing in for Sally Robinson, working on campaign finance. Laura Bierman is our person who talks about court simplification. We're not going to be talking about court simplification today, but if you ever have any court questions, Laura is your go-to. We have Marion Bott with us, who will talk about education. Barb Thomas, who's going to talk to us about equality of opportunity, which is formerly women's issues, and medical aid in dying. For our criminal justice reform team, we have Regatas Appling and Richard Rifkin. We have Kathy Stein, and we have Kathy Stein with us, who's going to be talking about our rural caucus. And then we have Judy Esterquest, who will talk to us about healthcare. So with that, let's dive right in. A couple of housekeeping questions or a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, you can enter them into the Q&A box, into the chat, and our issue specialists or state staff will get to your question either while the presentations are going on or at the end of the session. We're going to have some time for questions at the end, so if you want to hold them until then, you can absolutely do so. But let's dive right in. So one of the things that makes the League such a strong organization, and one of the things that I love most about the League, is that we are a grassroots organization that builds from the bottom up. This allows us to be member-driven, but it also allows for your voice to be heard in the issues that we take action on. It's absolutely crucial that as an organization, we speak with one voice, and that each level of the organization really plays a strong role in that. So I want to talk a little bit about what the responsibilities are at each one of those levels. So at the local level, leagues take action, obviously, on local issues, and you all work together, either regionally, to address regional issues in a manner that is consistent. At the local level, only the president, just as this is a reminder, only the president or someone designated by the president is able to speak for the league, although members can always take action on issues as individuals. At the state level, we're responsible for all messaging on state issues, and we're responsible to make sure that the messaging is consistent. So we work with our fantastic issue specialist team and the State Issues and Advocacy Committee to come up with appropriate responses to issues. If a local league wants to take action on a state issue, somebody must reach out to the state league first. And then lastly, we have the US League, which is responsible for determining policies, strategies that really ensure, again, consistent messaging on national issues and to make sure that we are being consistent across the country. So in a similar way that somebody at the local level can't take action on a state measure, we also can't take action on a national issue without reaching out to the folks at national first. So Well, we really could talk about the difference between local, state, and national advocacy. Today, we're going to focus only on state advocacy. So I will talk to you about how you as a member can let your voice be heard throughout this process. But before I dive into that, it is really important that we talk about how the State League acts through, let's talk about the system that we work within, which is, of course, the New York State budget and legislative session. So we are already into this timeline. Essentially, early January is the kickoff for the legislative session. The governor presents her state of the state, and the legislative session really begins. I think this happened on January 8th of this year, but don't quote me on that. This is also when committee meetings start happening again, and legislative session starts, but things are moving a little bit slower typically in this time period, because the focus is on the budget. So mid to late January, the governor presents her executive budget for the state. We saw she did that on January 15th or 16th. And now we are in this period where the legislature is holding 3 joint budget meetings, budget hearings, where they hear from state agencies and advocates across New York State on the governor's executive budget, and where folks feel more funding is needed, and just their thoughts and impressions on if this budget is going to allow New York State to do the work we need to do. So if you've been following the legislative updates that go out on Friday, you'll know that we've already submitted written testimony for the healthcare session as well as the education session. And we are gearing up to submit written testimony and then orally testify in the local government hearing next week. You can absolutely, you're more than welcome to watch that hearing. It's incredibly long. So if you want to see us talk, maybe join around 7 p.m. Once we get into late February, the governor is going to make some amendments to her budget. These are typically technical amendments, really small things that are kind of inconsequential. Although we've heard this year that some of these amendments may be more significant than in years past. The governor wanted to make sure that she got her budget out, and that means that things may have been a little bit rushed. So we do expect to see some amendments this year that are a little bit more significant. So that's things like, potentially adding money or taking money away from certain pots instead of things like fixing a word here or, reorganizing this paragraph, for example. Once we get to early March, each house, so the Assembly and the Senate, will release a one-house budget. So that's their idea of what New York State's budget should look like. And then in late March, the governor, the Speaker of the Senate, and the Majority Leader will get into a room and they will, as Laura always likes to say, do horse trading essentially, and they just kind of barter for what we're going to see in the final budget. And by April 1st, that budget needs to be finalized, and that is the beginning of the new fiscal year. So once we hit April, I should say that all throughout this process, folks are working on bills, working on legislative action. But really, once we get to late April, that's when most of the standalone bills that we work on are really going to start to take off. The budget is done. These bills are unrelated to the budget. And so we're going to see a lot more bills come up and to be considered in committees, and to be talked about, more bills being brought to the floor for a vote. And then June 6th of this year is the last day of session. So we track a number of different issues throughout the state, and we take action on those bills or pieces of legislation. We typically do this when a bill is on a committee agenda in the Assembly or the Senate, or if it's going to be on the floor for a vote in the Senate or the Assembly. But you can also see a general list here for what types of action we might take. So we might be writing a memo of support. We might be up at the Capitol lobbying legislators on certain issues. We might be hosting a press conference. There's a number of different ways that we can ensure that our voice gets out there and that we let legislators know what we want to see. So now that I've kind of gotten through that, I'm sure the big question on all of your minds is, how do we decide what issues are important and which of those issues do we decide to take action on? So on this side, I'm going to walk you through the process of how we decide to do just that. Everything everything we do at the League comes back to impact on issues, which if you haven't looked at it, it's a gorgeous document. It's about 300 pages, and it will walk you through each and every position that the League has ever taken, the New York State League has taken on issues throughout our history. And it also talks a little bit about the legislative action that we've done in years. So you can really kind of read through exactly what we've done on let's say, reproductive health care. And so in order to get those positions, our positions are adopted formally by members, by folks just like you, at either our annual meeting or our state or national convention delegates. Local leagues are able to propose new issues for study within the program process, which occurs every other year before the state convention. So we had our state convention last year. And then next year, if you'd like to get into this process, that's when we'll be doing that. But we can also concur with a position that's held by the National League, for example, or perhaps another state league across the country. If we don't have a position that's detailed in impact, then we can't take action on an issue. And this all comes back to the League being a grassroots organization that ensures that we've got input from all members before we decide to take action or take a position on something. So once we've got impact and issues finalized, each year we create a legislative agenda. This agenda is on its way out to all of you. If you haven't received it already, somebody in your league may have received it. Our 2024 agenda was sent out, I believe last week we sent them all out. So keep an eye out for that. This agenda really discusses broadly our positions on topic areas that have been our focus and what we may expect to take action on in the legislative session. So we work with our issue specialists to see if there's any significant changes that need to be added, but this really is like a very broad roadmap for the legislative session. So we'll then, after we create this legislative agenda, we're then looking at, okay, what are going to be, what will the priorities be when it comes to legislation this year? So we ask each of our local leagues to complete a local league priorities survey. And this is a great chance for you to let your league know what your top issues, the top things that you care about going into next session. Your league will submit that via a survey to the state league, and then we use those we compile all of those priorities, and then we use those priorities that have been identified by local leagues as we craft what's called our pre-budget packet, which is a list of priority issues that we would like to see included in the state's budget. I've sent a note out to all of our advocacy chairs, but we expect to get that pre-budget lobby packet out probably mid-February of this year. After we do our pre-budget packet and the budget wraps up, that whole process we just talked about wraps up, we then move on to the post-budget lobby packet. And this is where we're going to see a lot of the bills that are, a lot of those standalone bills, as I said. It will go out to all local league presidents and advocacy chairs, and it includes the bills that we are really going to be taking action on throughout the end of session. And in order to create this packet, we use the incredible insight from our issue specialists, the feedback we got from members earlier in the session, and then we take a look at, okay, what's really going to be moving this session? What bills have a little bit of traction? What has a chance to actually move forward and get passed, because that's what we want to put all of our effort and all of our people power behind. And then the last kind of piece in the timeline is our advocacy day. And of course, I didn't look up the date of our advocacy day this year before this webinar, because why would I? So Laura can help me out here. Our advocacy day this year is either going to be May 7th or May 14th. And I will reach out to you all.
May 7th.
May 7th. Thank you, Laura. I don't know why I didn't look that up. So on May 7th, which is a Tuesday, we invite you all to join us at our New York State office in Albany, where we will talk to you about issues and bills that are going to be, that we've been lobbying on up at the Capitol. We'll have a couple of experts come in and talk to you about these bills, give you some great talking points, and then we will all head up to the Capitol together, where you have the chance to lobby your legislator on these issues. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to get involved, especially, or even if you haven't had the chance to lobby yet. This is a great opportunity to do that, because we'll be there to kind of guide you each step of the way. So keep your eyes out for more information on that advocacy day and how to sign up for that. All right. So what are the ways that you can take action? So our issue specialists are going to talk a little bit more about this, but just a reminder, you can always take action on local issues. But again, only the president can speak on behalf of your league. You can join a state committee. So that's what some of our issue specialists are going to be talking about. And then you can also participate in identifying priorities for your local league through that local league survey. You can always work to follow legislation that you care about by using either the Senate or the Assembly website linked here. And if you ever have any questions about what you can or can't do, you can always reach out to me via email. So I just want to highlight this survey. This is something that you all hopefully just completed. It's collected every January or February, but it's, again, that opportunity for each local league to let their voice be heard on what priorities they think we should focus on during the legislative session. And so this year, I believe we had 22 leagues that responded. So this is a push for you all to make sure that your league responds next year. And folks responded with their top 3 legislative priorities. All right, so after saying all of that, I am going to finally kick it over to our issue specialists and committee chairs. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Kate Doran, who's going to be talking with us about election law. Kate?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very, very much. It's a real privilege to have your time and attention. Everyone has so many demands on their time, and that you would choose to be here is a real, as I say, it's a privilege. So election law can be pretty wonky. And I am very fortunate to I'm not a chair of a committee. I'm part of a team has been headed by Sally Robinson. Laura and Erica are part of the team, and Michelle Lamberti. And I do my small part to advise and participate. So we have many issues this year that we're very excited about, and we feel, maybe Erica can jump in, but we got out of the governor's office a really strong message that they care about election issues. The funding was powerfully strong this year for local county boards of elections, and also for mailing of postage paid mailing for ballots, absentee ballots back and forth. I believe that's correct. So if you haven't heard the numbers, I think they're in the state voter. So my theme is administration and operations today. The bills that we are excited about and hopeful to see move this year are related to the on-the-ground poll site issues. So we are supporting a bill that would require every local board of elections to employ at least 4 full-time employees in addition to the commissioners. This is huge. Eric and I just recently came back from the NYSECA convention. This is a gathering of all the commissioners, elections commissioners throughout the state. And everyone, except the ones from New York City, were saying they don't have enough staff. They don't have enough staff in their own offices. They don't have enough poll workers. So I want to move into that because I think Erica has prepared a slide for you all. Let's see. Yes. Now, every one of the commissioners whom we met with up in Albany was very concerned about recruiting and retaining poll workers. And I want to let you know, we're grassroots, as you know, and we started out in election administration. Our organization started because we wanted the world and the US to recognize that women had the right to vote. And now we are continuing to work on administration and operations. So this is in the election law. It is there now. We don't have to lobby for this. We don't have to get anybody to pass it, but your county commissioners do not have to set up their poll sites with 4 inspectors and clerks, et cetera, et cetera. You can see this, you can check it out. It's 3.500, 3-500. My recommendation, I would encourage all of you in the local leagues, if your county board of elections doesn't hold public meetings, set up a meeting with them every once in a while, maybe once a month, maybe once every couple of months, and talk to them about this. They can set up their poll site, their election day poll site, in a way that more resembles what happens in early voting. They can do that. It's in the law, and they don't have to use as many poll workers. You can see, provide for at least 4 inspectors to be assigned at each poll site. So you could have a check-in station, and then you could send people to any table, anytime, wherever there is an availability to sign in. So I really want to encourage you. I know it's made a huge difference for me personally in New York City, being present at the commissioners' meetings. And I would say also, when we're out there registering voters, which we all do regularly and we're very good at, ask some of these young people, would you like to be a poll worker? Maybe, I mean, I encourage all league members to sign up and be poll workers. But we can ask the people we are registering to vote, are you interested in being a poll worker? Be on the front lines of democracy. See how things really work. See how the laws interact with the voters. I can tell you it's a very gratifying experience, and it gives us even more credibility. I mean, we have an enormous amount of credibility as an organization, but this is even more so. We're saying we're willing to be on the front lines. So, Erica, I don't know, do you need to shut me down now? There was only one other thing that's not related to election operations that I wanted to mention, and that was the Erica bill, the Eric bill. I love Erica, so there we go. So Eric is the Electronic Registration Information Center. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership org that states use to share voter roll data to maintain more accurate voter rolls. This is huge. And we all know that voters are discouraged if they go to the poll site and they see someone they know or love who's passed and they're still on the voter rolls. This will help to fix that. The other thing is, if we have cleaner and maybe smaller voter registration lists, that will impact the number of poll workers who are needed, because you have fewer people who have to vote at a particular election district. If the if the rolls are cleaner and they're not burdened with voters who aren't meant to be there. So it's a wonky, again, we'll come back to, it's kind of wonky, but very, very important. And then there's a related John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, which we have, and we're hoping to get to see the John Flateau database bill passed. And that's the final piece to really strengthen that whole law to provide information for all of us housed at I think at the SUNYs or the CUNYs as well, Eric, I'm not sure.
Yes,
But
yep.
super, super important. It's the century of data. The century of data I would submit, and also the century of on the ground administration. So the last thing I will say is I don't chair a committee, but I'm always delighted to hear from anybody if anybody has any questions, and I am never afraid to say I don't know or don't understand. I'll figure it out, or I'll research and I'll find out. And so again, thank you very, very kindly. And Eric, if I missed anything, please, please add your addendums.
No, I think you've got it all, Kate. Thank you so much for that. I guess the only other thing I'd add, just so that folks are on the lookout for it, is the other huge thing that we are seeing being talked about more and more this session is the impact of AI and the way in which AI will play into our elections in 2024. So there are a number of bills that are out there, and Kate and I have been working in coalition with our coalition partners to really dig into some of the bills that would help ensure that all New York State voters are not swayed by kind of artificial advertisements, and have the information they need before they're going to the polls. So Kate and I have been looking into this. We're also, as Kate said, looking at those bills on staffing and things that our boards of elections and local boards have expressed to us that they really need as we go into one of which will surely be one of the biggest elections in in at least the past, yeah, it will be a big election. So thank you so much for that, Kate. I really, really appreciate that. And with that, we will move right on. I'd like to introduce Beth Radow, who is in charge of all of our environmental issues. So I will hand it over to you, Beth.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm going to read from prepared remarks. I've got a lot to say in a short amount of time. In short, the warming climate sets the stage for our priorities on energy, agriculture, and the environment. And the League of Women Voters of New York State and the League of Women Voters US has identified climate change as an emergency. The impacts of a warming climate have implications for everything across the board: our health, safety, habitable buildings, transportation, energy choices, agriculture, the economy in general, and vulnerable communities in specific. The range of possible avenues to support will be strengthened by member engagement, and you're most welcome to become engaged. While the Committee on Energy, Agriculture, and the Environment focuses on a few pieces of legislation that should not limit local leagues from identifying issues consistent with existing priorities, such as addressing the climate emergency, to address through possible memoranda of support, programming, and local action, as well as other items that were listed earlier. And if you have an issue you'd like to address in some fashion relating to this committee's work, please contact me at enradow@gmail.com. I think that's also posted on the screen. On the topic of energy, we support renewable energy across all sectors while protecting natural resources. The League supports policy that safeguards our air quality, our water quality, our soil quality, and consistent with last year, we will continue to support policy that will reduce packaging pollution, especially plastic. It's a program that establishes mandatory standards for waste reduction and recycling, reduces use of toxic chemicals, what we know as so-called forever chemicals, including endocrine disrupting chemicals, that prohibits incineration of this packaging and provides for third-party oversight instead of self-enforcement by the manufacturing industry. This latter point does not appear as a stated priority in Governor Hochul's 2024 remarks. We did a program on plastic pollution in the fall, which I encourage people here to watch if you haven't had a chance. It's going to take time to tackle plastic pollution, and in our lifetimes, this is going to be a heavy lift. But to optimize your good health by reducing exposure to forever endocrine disruptor chemicals, I encourage you to go to websites such as in the Environmental Working Group, which is ewg.org, and another really wonderful organization called Mamavation, MAMAVATION.com, for tips on living toxic free. The League also continues to support updating the New York's beverage deposit law, known as the Bottle Bill, by expanding the required types of beverages sold in glass and plastic bottles that require deposits to include non-carbonated and alcoholic beverage, and increasing the deposit from a nickel to a dime. The New York State League supported the original bottle bill that was enacted in June 1982 and went into effect in July 1983. So one option that you have is to seek support from your state assembly member and senator on these issues. Resiliency from flooding is a priority listed by the governor and the legislature. Addressing the impacts of flooding reflects a key focus of our committee this legislative session. While New York aims to reduce reliance on fossil fuel to address the climate emergency, we just experienced a record year of heat in 2023 with extreme weather to match. A bit of science: as the atmosphere warms, it holds approximately 7% more moisture for each degree of Celsius that it warms. What's the result? It's the kind of intense flooding that we experienced in New York, the Hudson Valley, Westchester, and other regions in 2023. Governor Hochul announced in her State of the State a resiliency plan to protect New Yorkers from extreme weather. And in addition, an Office of Flooding Prevention and Mitigation has been proposed in the form of legislation. Now, this office would coordinate existing statewide work on flooding, support municipalities and their efforts to prevent and mitigate flooding, and research flooding impacts and mitigation throughout the state. The establishment of a $500 million annual fund has been proposed for state water resiliency projects such as flood mitigation and stormwater mitigation under the joint custody of the state comptroller and the Commissioner of Taxation and Finance. An Office of Flooding Prevention will make possible for people at the local level to have a specific place to go for relief. And this would not only include money coming out of the state, but also the federal government. This is something else that you can speak to your assembly member and senator about. On the topic of food, if you're looking for a local project that could yield meaningful results with potentially minimal work on your part, I would return to the topic of food waste, which is something we've covered for a number of years. For a bit of background, effective January 1, 2022, the New York State Food Donation and Food Scrap Recycling Law began to require businesses such as grocery stores and institutions that generate an annual average of 2 tons of wasted food per week to donate rather than dumpster their excess edible food. And this law intends to reduce wasted edible food by making it available to organizations that feed our growing hungry population. Feeding New York is designated to oversee that food diversion is actually happening, but it's a tall order because the number of stores and institutions statewide required to comply with this law far exceeds the number of people currently tasked with the law's enforcement. Great law, we need to have it enforced. As a result, quantities of edible food are still being dumpstered every day across the state, and people are hungry. Consider contacting the executive director of your local Feeding America / Feeding New York chapter and ask if they are checking locally to see if the law is being effectively enforced. And if not, what can they do to enlist people with vans to pick up and transport the edible food from the supermarket and other institutions to local organizations that share the food with people in need? One more note. There is proposed legislation to add climate education into New York's K-12 public schools across all academic topics. Currently, New Jersey and Connecticut are the only 2 states that mandate climate education. If New York were to follow through, that would make us the 3rd state to do so. Keeping up with the environment impacts the health, safety, and a sustainable environment, and it requires a functioning democracy to do so. Thank you to all that you are doing to keep our democracy strong. By showing up to do what we can, and we will make a difference. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Beth. Really appreciate that. That was fantastic. Beth, we've got a question in the chat about if you'd be willing to share your remarks with folks after the webinar. So,
oh, you mean share the written remarks?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll send them to you for sure.
Okay, great, fantastic. Thanks, Beth. All right, so we are now moving on to Barb Thomas, who's going to talk to us about equality of opportunity as well as medical aid in dying. Barb?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. We come to most of the work that we do under equality of opportunity through our position on in support of comparable worth, which is the notion that you can rate jobs that on skills and you can come up with a numerical score. So you can actually compare jobs that are, next slide, please. But you can compare jobs that are different, but say that they require a certain level of skills that would both score as, say, 10s, and then they should have those things. So we have a lot of laws that we want to have passed. And the number one law that we want to see is not actually a legislative priority anymore. It is the New York State Equal Rights Amendment. And that is as you see, there are all those categories. Race and color were and are protected in the Constitution right now. But when we vote, then we will be adding ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, creed, sex, which we are now defining as including sexual orientation and gender identity or expression, pregnancy and pregnancy outcomes, reproductive health care, and autonomy. So, next slide. The New York State Equal Rights Amendment was approved by 2 sessions of the legislature. As you know, that needs to be done. And then it will be on the back of your ballot on November 5th, 2024. The league at the state level and the local leagues need to educate the public about that New York State ERA. And you need to remember that the state league is supporting it, so that's our position, and you're free to go ahead and support it at the local level. It is important to get these protections into our Constitution, even though we already have those protections in New York State laws. And that's really the main argument for it, because we do protect most of those rights in law already. But laws, as you know, can be changed and pretty easily. The Constitution is a much harder sell for changing it. So those rights that we want to continue to have, we need to protect by putting them into our New York State Constitution. Next. Oh, you know, one more thing I want to say about the New York State ERA is that there is a statewide task force on the ERA, and every league is entitled and should have 2 representatives on that. So if your league does not have 2 representatives on this state ERA task force, you should contact Erica and ask how to get them on, which is easy. Asking will do it. Okay, so then, as I said, we go back to our support for equal rights and comparable worth for pay. And so we're going to be supporting fair pay for home care. We did it last year too. And one of the things, the reason that we do that is that the majority of people in the home care business are either women or people of color, and they have forever been discriminated against. So we need to support bringing up the pay for people who are providing home care. When I think that when we get to healthcare, we're also going to see support for that same thing, and maybe even from the Rural Caucus. But we will be supporting that. Next. And then we're supporting increases in childcare compensation. And we discovered last year, or maybe the year before, that even when the state mandated some increases, the managed care companies that were providing some, or the mandated pay employee increases, need to actually get down to the employees, not just go to the umbrella organizations. So we're going to be supporting that legislation. Next. And then we support legislation that ensures every person in New York State has access to good health care, regardless of their financial or employment status. I'm sure you're going to hear that from Judy, because that is one of the reasons that the State League supports the New York Health Care Act. So, and we know that in terms of people's well-being and their access to employment, that every person in New York State needs good health care, and they don't get it. And one of the biggest barriers that we saw during the COVID epidemic was that people, when they lost their job, they lost health care, if they even had it in the beginning. And we know that there's a lot of people who don't qualify for Medicaid or go on and off Medicaid because of the way it's structured. So we need to have equal access to healthcare. So that's another thing that that we're going to be doing. Okay, the next thing that we are working on is, and it's a separate like category in the New York State League, is the medical aid in dying. And I hoping that we get that also. I saw that Judy is going to be supporting, and her committee will be working on that too. But the New York State medical proposed law, which is sponsored by an ex-league president, Amy Paulin, and by Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel. And the thing to remember about this medical aid in dying law, which we are supporting, is that we do have a position in favor of it. And we did a study, and we found that there really, in the states that have been doing medical aid in dying, there just are not problems of people being coerced into signing up and getting a prescription, and then somebody else maybe coercing them into taking that prescription. But we know that even when people do get access in other states, that even people who have prescriptions don't necessarily take it. But it is a great comfort to them, even if they don't take it, to know that they would be in control and to have a good death. And I see Erica's hurrying me up, but okay, so the link is here. And I'm actually going to copy that. But I can't. All right, well, I'll have to go out and come back, because I wanted to let you know that this coming Monday, February 5th at 9 a.m., there will be a virtual opportunity. So we've had a lot of people from the Capital District lobbying in person in Albany for this bill, but we need to have people from across the state participate. And the link is there, but and I'm trying to put in the chat. So thank you very much for listening to that. And back to you, Erica.
Thank you so much, Barb. I know you have a lot to cover in your topic area, so appreciate you moving through all of that. Okay, so I am gonna jump into talking a little bit about campaign finance. We will make sure that the link to the virtual lobby day that Barb talked about is plugged into the chat for folks who'd like to join. But for now, I'm going to shift and I'm going to talk about campaign finance. I'm the stand-in for Sally Robinson. So the main focus this year is, as it was last year, this year is the inaugural year for the New York State Public Campaign Finance Program, which is incredibly exciting. It has been many, many, many years coming. To see this program finally enacted is going to be a huge thing for New York State. It is the first step towards making sure that we start to take money out of our politics and that small donors to candidates have more of a voice, and that the representatives that we elect are not only representing the small few number of wealthy donors, but are truly representing the folks in their district and the folks that they should be representing. So this year, we're going to see that program in action for the first time. And where you'll hear about it most from the State League will probably be during this budget period. As I think Kate said, we saw a lot of great funding for elections, and we also saw some pretty substantial funding for this program that the governor included in her budget. She included $114 million, which is exactly what the program needs to ensure that it has the funds to get off the ground. So the hard part will now be advocating to ensure that we see that number in both of the one house budgets that we talked about, and then in the final budget for New York State. The program already has 200 participants signed up, which is great. We just reached 200 the other day, and are hoping for even more folks before the deadline, which is sometime mid-February. As I said, this is really going to be a critical program to kind of take steps towards taking that money out of politics. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I'd be happy to if anybody has any questions. The other things that we're going to be looking at this year is we're going to be looking at a few other issues, such as the way that campaign funds are used by candidates, and a couple of other issues that we've been working on for many, many years, and we're going to see what we can push forward. But today, I mainly wanted to highlight that public campaign finance program, which is what you'll hear from us about a lot in the coming months. So with that, I am going to pass it off to our next presenter. We have Marion Bott with us, who's going to be talking about education. Marion?
Hi, everybody. So I'm the education finance specialist, and just to be clear, for those who haven't worked with this issue in the past, education finance, as we define it in my portfolio, focuses on the pre-K through 12 portion of the education budget. Once again, we would love to have a higher education specialist. That's not me. However, this year, we ended up with a very unpleasant, unexpected surprise. This is the barbell to the pleasant surprise that Erica just referred to in the campaign finance section of the budget. We found that the governor did not do what almost everyone expected her to do, which was to continue to fulfill the calculated promise of implementing full foundation aid to the school districts around the state. So having sat through literally from 9:30 a.m. until 7:30 p.m., our hearings in which we submitted testimony this past Thursday, did not speak at the hearings, but the very good news that came out of those hearings is that every single legislator who attended those hearings was outraged. And that means that there is a call to action for the governor to either in her 30-day amendments or very shortly thereafter, correct the mistake that they all believe she made in shortchanging about 50% of the school districts in the state. So we will be sending an action alert early next week. I'm looking very much forward to working for my first time now with Nancy Rosenthal on a message that should come from our president. We will be encouraging people at the local level to help us. And we haven't had an education committee for a long time. I didn't really think that people needed one, because we thought we were doing well with the phase-in of foundation aid. And so we weren't too worried about this issue. And as a result, I think that it has fallen down the league's priorities. But oh my goodness, in this case, school districts become very, very hard pressed to balance budgets. And I will go through in the action alert draft the arguments that you need to be able to understand in addressing correspondence with the governor. Jane Colvin asked, how and why have 50% of the schools been shortchanged? The calculation that is made every year is based on a consumer price index adjustment to supposedly adjust for increased costs, which always occur. The governor decided to take aim at the consumer price index methodology and prolonged the number of years of the calculation from the 1 year to 1 year, which had been used since 2009, I believe. And she decided to elongate it to 10 years and then truncate the highest year of inflation and the lowest year of inflation, coming out with an average that basically took $500 million out of the cost, which is great for her if she's trying to balance a budget. But $500 million is still $500 million. Some people will tell you it's 400 million. At the end of the day, after having listened to 10 hours of testimony, is there any credence to the governor's point that there are fewer students in the system? Yes, Michelle, there is credence to that point. Now, for those of you who have been educators on this call, please pitch in and help me with this point. When you reduce the number of students in a class, at a certain point, yes, you can eliminate a whole teacher. But if you take a classroom of 30 students and you lose 3 students, you still have to have a teacher. So if you think about fixed and variable costs, this is what happens in education. And part of the reason that the League of Women Voters fought so hard when charter schools were first enacted back in 1998, and leagues such as the Buffalo League, Rochester League, Albany League saw charter schools coming in. The reason the league fought so hard and prevailed to obtain a category of aid called charter school transition aid is that knowledgeable educators and people who have been in the system on their school boards in whatever way they'd been involved in budgeting, they knew that you can't, everything is not a sliding, smooth, variable cost reduction or increase when student populations decrease. So the governor has in fact used the argument of population decline. Conversely, when the experts looked at the school aid runs, they found that the schools that were having very large percentage cuts had not in fact lost enrollment precipitously. They had lost enrollment over time, but not to the degree that the budget cuts this year warranted. The other thing the governor did is she played with something we call hold harmless. Hold harmless was a very big issue for us when we did our education study in 2006. Wealthier districts who were asked whether the League of Women Voters would support the Campaign for Fiscal Equity said that the problem they had with supporting the Campaign for Fiscal Equity was that they did not want to see money taken away from the best and most prestigious school districts in the state. In other words, no Robin Hood. So the league debated this, and this is a mechanism that some people call hold harmless, but the league really held firm to the notion that excellence should be rewarded, not punished. So within reason, we have a position and impact on issues, and we do condone the idea that transition adjustments, when appropriate, should be made, meaning you can reduce aid over time. But what happened this year is the Republicans upstate came out swinging during this testimony, and I do mean swinging. Several of the legislators recited with passion the school districts in their catchment area who were going to lose money, and they were furious. So there has been, from the legislators themselves, a call to action. We have been asked to do our part, and I would like to ask you all to find people in your leagues who are interested in helping. My email is there. And when I say helping, I mean doing two things specifically. Number one, sending us articles from local newspapers that describe the boots on the ground situation in your region. And number two, helping to actually make people make these phone calls, because it's one thing to send out an action alert, it's another thing to get people to do it. So I will finish with that, and you're all always welcome to reach out to me if you have questions about education and finance.
Thank you so much, Marion, for that overview of what's a very, very timely issue. As Marion said, we're going to be sending out an action alert next week, so keep an eye out for that. Or as Marion said, feel free to reach out to her directly with for other info. Thanks, Marion. All right, so we have 3 more issue specialists who are going to be talking to us this morning. So without further ado, I will give the stage to Richard Rifkin, who's going to talk to us about criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Erica, and good morning, everyone. Let me start off by saying that our committee had, and the league had a big success last year with passage of the Clean Slate Act. This probably affects several million people. It's a huge reform for which basically what it does. I'm not going to go into depth, but basically it allows people who have criminal record, if they have avoided criminal activity and contact with the criminal justice system for a number of years, it varies whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, their criminal record is sealed. And that is a huge help going toward the rehabilitation of those who have these records, because having a criminal record makes your life very difficult. So that was a big success. We were invited to the bill signing ceremony. And we now move on. The big project for our committee over, I'd say the last year or so, has been voting while in jail. And there is a bill that is pending in the legislature, which is fine, but not really critical to this project. What happened was we did a study. Hazel Weiser of our committee really did a terrific job. And we did a survey of the counties outside of New York City and whether and how they're enabling those who are incarcerated to vote while in jail, because there is an absolute legal right for those serving in prison or in jail to vote unless they've been convicted of a felony. And the results of this survey were not positive, let me put it that way. Very few people and very few sheriffs who run the jails were allowing or enabling people to do it. Some just had no programs, some caused difficulty, and a handful of them really worked with the League of Women Voters to enable those in custody to move forward. A couple of weeks ago, the Sheriff's Association gave us the opportunity to speak about this at their annual meeting in Albany. And Laura was there. She participated in the presentation, as did Hazel. And we had what I thought was a very successful presentation. We got a much better reception than I had anticipated we would. And we seemed to start to build a relationship with the sheriffs. And the reason I raise this now is that as a follow-up, we are hoping that local chapters will now get in touch with their sheriffs and basically say, we want to work with you. We'll be sending out instructions to the local chapters as to how to proceed. We will not be asking the sheriffs to do everything. What we will be asking the sheriffs to do is enable the league and any other institutions that are interested in doing this in going in to the jails to register people in jails to vote, to help them with absentee ballots. And what we're really going to be asking for is for sheriffs to publicize this, to set aside space in the institutions where we can come in and assist those in enabling them to vote. So that really has been the big project for the Criminal Justice Committee over the last year or so. So between the Clean Slate Bill and that project, it has taken up a lot of our time. The coming year, this current session, I will tell you, this is hard if you're trying to do criminal justice in the year before an election. I think all of you know what the politics of criminal justice, and it's very hard to do reforms in a year such as this. But our committee has decided for this year to focus on fair pay for those who are incarcerated and actually are engaging in labor during their period of incarceration. They're doing work in the jails, and they're either not getting paid or getting paid tiny, tiny wages. We think they should be entitled to fair pay. And there are a couple of bills which move us in that direction, and we will be supporting those bills. And finally, the other issue that we'd like to look at is sentencing, the standards for sentencing, things like eliminating mandatory minimums, things like allowing somebody who's incarcerated to ask for a review of his or her sentence after some period of time and maybe have it shortened. Those are the issues that we intend to be working on this year in what we recognize is going to be a difficult year for criminal justice reform.
Great, thank you so much, Richard. That was fantastic, and thank you for coloring what it's really going to look like as we go to session in terms of moving criminal justice legislation forward. It certainly will be more difficult this year. All right, so our next presenter is going to be Judy Esterquest, and Judy will be talking to us about healthcare. Judy?
Thank you. So I want to thank the New York State League for putting this on. I think it's really informative, and the Healthcare Committee really appreciates the opportunity to talk to everybody, as I'm sure all the rest of us have said. And thank you for showing up on a Saturday morning, too. I want to start with 3 committee fundamentals. First, all of us joined this committee because we're passionate advocates for the League goals. These are League goals of affordable, accessible, equitable healthcare for every resident of New York State, particularly those who are currently underserved. And most of us joined this committee because we're advocates for the New York Health Act before we joined. This act has been introduced in this session and is a priority for us. That said, it's unlikely to be brought to the floor for a vote this year. Instead, the effort will be around educating legislative sponsors to be active advocates and mobilizing voters into bringing it up. So for league members, let us know if you want to join or if you want to know more about this bill, because we also want to talk to you. Since healthcare constitutes about 18% of our GDP and affects every one of us, we care about a lot of issues, many of them intersectional with other issue committees, as you've heard from several already. And you can see from what follows with more commentary in our testimony, which we submitted for the January 23rd joint session. That provides some of what we're about to talk about and more commentary. So our priorities for issues are likely to be part of the budget negotiations. So the pre-budget issues are, we want to hold Medicaid funding levels steady and extend Medicaid coverage, which might sound impossible, but in fact, some of the things that I'm about to recommend, the fiscal implications are going to be negligible. For example, extending Medicaid post-birth funding. Last year, we extended it to a year to 6 years. Too many New York State children lose access to vaccinations and well-child checkups because exiting Medicaid is fast and regaining Medicaid is slow. Covering small children is inexpensive and high value. Then there's extending essential care to undocumented New Yorkers by means of a federal waiver that other states use, and which CMS has told our Department of Health that they will accept. So New York State currently pays for very expensive emergency care. In asking for this waiver will actually reduce how much we spend, or we will break even, and it will make a phenomenal difference for public health. We want to expand statewide care for doulas, as Barb Thomas mentioned. We have had pilot programs across the state have proved their worth in reducing maternal mortality and morbidity. Run it out to the rest of the state. And that also, of course, saves serious money in emergency care and death. We want to ensure that eligible incarcerated people leave prison already covered by Medicaid, which has been shown to be a key issue to reduce recidivism. This is a criminal justice issue. We want fair pay for home care and safety net hospitals, which the Rural Caucus and the Women's Equity and I think I just heard others say it, and revitalized mobile emergency ambulances and mobile paramedical services. For example, bringing health care to dairy farm workers who are often legal immigrants living in barracks with no transportation and no insurance. And we want expanded childcare for reasons already discussed. Among the Article 7 issues we care most about, and those are in the governor's budget mentions that we have to change the law in order to get these things to happen. We want to protect New Yorkers against medical debt. We've had a lot of progress on this. There's still a ways to go. We want to address healthcare workforce shortages. Currently, across the entire state, workforce shortages among healthcare workers is dangerous and dire in every provider category. Physicians, registered nurses, physician's assistants, doulas, home care aides. Any place you look, people have left healthcare or more people need it, and we don't have people doing it. And what's happening is we are having staffing issues and we're having burnout issues. We need to get this fixed. There's going to be a whole package on this. Our legislative priorities, this is the post-budget issues, include the New York Health Act, as I mentioned, medical aid in dying, as Barbara so eloquently discussed, expanding telemedicine and providing parity for behavioral health, which Kathy Stein will discuss, an affordable prescription package set of bills, because one of the most the first one just passed the Senate. It still has to go to the Assembly, which includes authorizing the Department of Health to license manufacturing of generic drugs. These drugs are not currently being produced because while such licensing will do far better than break even, you're not going to lose money doing it. They won't produce the level of profits that pharma corporations insist on, they set as minimums. So these are drugs that would make a real difference in how much people have to pay. And they also would make a difference for providers, and they're not getting produced in this country. We also support expanded childcare because making it high quality, affordable, and accessible to working families will help children stay safe and healthy and will also help local economies. This is a cross issues issue. And I accidentally didn't put on the pages gun safety, which is currently the leading cause of death for children under 18. Gun safety is now a health issue. One thing we're excited about hearing advocates from other issue areas, next page, please, advocate for health issues. I'm not going to detail all of these. Just note how many issues that you've already heard about intersect with health. And as a caveat, the New York Health Act would ameliorate the problems of so many of these disparate issues. The New York Health Act would solve these, or mostly solve them. If you aren't familiar with it, any of us on the Healthcare Committee would love the opportunity to discuss it with you or your local league. Just ask. We will give you 15 minutes or half an hour or whatever you'd like. So, final page. What do? We have meetings. We have a newsletter where we send out health news that is both New York centric and US centric, and we have members track specific issues that matter most to them, for example, gun safety. And we'd love to have you join, and we'd love to answer questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. Judy, are you able to plug in the link for folks to sign up for the Google group in the chat?
I will try, yes.
Okay, if not, folks can reach out directly to Judy. And Judy, if you can't do that, just plug your email in so folks can reach out to get involved. Thank you so much. All right, so last but not least, we have Kathy Stein with us, who is going to talk about the Rural Caucus. Kathy?
Yes, thanks. And thanks everyone for being here. And we're a caucus. We're not a committee. So I'm not an expert on any of these things, but I will give you an overview of some of our issues. And as Judy has mentioned, I mean, others have mentioned, there's overlap. We overlap with lots of the other specialists. And some of the priorities I'm going to mention here, we will be advocating more as individuals than as the league, but many of them definitely fall under league positions. There are a lot of deserts in rural areas, and so you can kind of think of my overview as having to do with trying to address some of these deserts, starting with healthcare. As Judy mentioned, there's going to be packages of legislation introduced soon to address acute and long-term workforce shortages in healthcare and mental health care. These shortages are especially dire in rural areas, so we hope that these are going to be good packages of bills. Telemedicine, as Judy mentioned, would help address some of these shortages, but it needs to be expanded to include more, mental health care and also behavioral health care. We have severe substance abuse issues, opioid addiction, especially in rural areas. Other healthcare legislation that is of particular interest in rural areas has to do with effective community input before closures and mergers of hospitals, but also before hospitals don't close themselves, but close emergency rooms or stop offering maternity care. We're also concerned with legislation that will create and budget items that will create predictable funding for emergency medical and community paramedical services, including more funding to train and recruit EMTs. Due to staffing shortages for ambulance service in my home county of St. Lawrence, wait times have become dangerously long, sometimes over an hour waiting for an ambulance. Lack of affordable, accessible childcare, which Barb Thomas touched on, is significantly impacting rural communities' economic growth and the future prospects of our children. Several New York counties have created childcare provider boot camp programs involving local colleges and county development offices to try to recruit and train more providers, but the resources to help providers pay their employees competitive wages are inadequate. And Barb mentioned this. For example, childcare providers are finding it impossible to compete with fast food restaurants in terms of wages, and that is really sad. Despite childcare workers being poorly paid, childcare is unaffordable for many parents, and available subsidies often come with burdensome paperwork. In addition, the coupling of childcare subsidies to hours worked doesn't allow for sometimes significant travel times that parents in rural areas require to drop off and pick up their kids. I'd like to recommend the Empire State Campaign for Childcare as a source for information about these policies. Barb also mentioned there's a crisis level shortage of workers in the home care sector, and this really is impacting rural areas very, very strongly. And the New York Caring Majority Coalition is putting a spotlight on the role that private insurance companies have played in redirecting Medicaid money intended for caregivers into boosting company profits. Similar thing happens in childcare, but it's happening in home care too. And they are calling for the passage of the Home Care Savings and Reinvestment Act as a necessary start to addressing this crisis in home care. Next slide, Erica. Under the U.S. position on digital equity, the Rural Caucus members will be advocating for a much-needed revision in the way that cable television providers fund PEG media, which is public educational governmental media. A bill has just been introduced that would take widely used streaming services into account when calculating the fees owed by cable service providers. PEG media provides an important source of public access to government meetings and other locally produced content. This can be especially important in areas where there is no longer a local newspaper. Speaking of local journalism, the Local Journalism Sustainability Act, which was reduced last session, would provide tax breaks to local newspapers based on, on their payroll expenses, and also provide small tax rebates to their subscribers. And I want to take a moment to plug the League of Women Voters of Washington that is proposing a LWVUS concurrence with their position on local journalism and democracy. And I hope you've all heard about this proposed concurrence. I encourage you to recommend consideration of it when you do the LWVUS program planning survey. Finally, as we've heard eloquently from Marian Bott, the executive budget called for steep cuts in foundation aid to state schools, and rural area schools would be really, really hammered by this. And so, Marian, definitely I will be talking to our members about helping you get more information about that so that we can hopefully get, and our state Assembly and Senate members are galvanized already, I know, on this issue. So last slide, please. And just, I mentioned, some coalitions that the League is a member of that have lots of information on legislation and budget issues. And I encourage you to, get involved in them or subscribe to their newsletters. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. That was great. And thank you so much to all of our issue specialists who joined us on the call today and were able to share so much incredible information about what we will be looking at this legislative session. So I'm now going to open the floor for some questions. I will hand it over. I know that Laura has been tracking the questions in the chat, so I will send it to Laura, who can ask those questions to certain issue specialists in particular. And then after that, if folks have additional questions, you can raise your virtual hand. Laura, what's our first question?
Thanks, Eric. To Kate and/or Erica, on the Eric bill, do you have any idea how many voters would be reduced from the rolls if that were passed?
Hi, this is Kate. Judy put that question to me in the chat, and I love it because it forces me to do the kind of research that I don't typically do. But there's a lot of very specific information in the election law about the number of voters in election districts and how that relates to the operation of poll sites. And I'm going to delve into that, but I don't know the answer specifically to Judy's question at this moment. I don't know, Erica, if you can say anything.
I don't unfortunately have a specific answer, but I do know that many of New York State's poll books are far overdue for a refresher. All poll books are handled separately by counties, and then they all feed up into a statewide database that's supposed to kind of bring them all together. But it still means that county by county, folks are doing things differently. So essentially what it means is that the state database never matches exactly what we have on the county database, which makes it that much harder for voters to either be purged from the rolls or for folks to make sure that they're added in with the right address. There's just an incredible amount of cleaning up that has to be done in order to make elections more efficient, and to really solidify the fact that New York State elections are safe and secure to voters all across the state.
Okay, thanks. Is there any legislation dealing with candidate truthfulness?
There is legislation.
Now, Erica, why don't you take this? We've been working on it in the, or discussing it at least at the Let New York Vote Coalition. That's very useful to the league.
Yes, yeah, there is one piece of legislation that would target, that came out after, everything happened on Long Island. We have not been incredibly involved in advocating for that bill specifically, just because it's something as Kate said, we've really been diving into the details. So we'll let y'all know if that's something that we decide to pursue, or if any similar legislation comes out that we think would work effectively this year. So keep your eyes out.
Thanks. And I just have to comment on some recent things that are being posted in the chat, because I need to qualify. You issue specialists, you cannot speak for the state league on suggesting that local leagues do these program planning. The state league has not decided if they are supporting any of these yet. And so when these issue specialists are suggesting you as local leagues look at these, that's fine. But they are not speaking for the state league. The state league is going to be looking at all these and will decide, but please do not think that because they're suggesting that you support these, that the state league is supporting. We may, I don't know yet. We haven't decided, but please, issue specialists, please do not encourage local leagues in the name of the state league to support these, because we haven't made that decision yet. So as individuals, you can, or as your local league, you can do that, but please just hold off. You can't speak for the state league until the state league decides what we want to say. So anyway, just a qualifier there. Beth, is there anything in our actions now about CO2 fracking? Is Beth still? I know she had to leave early. Beth, are you still there?
I think that Beth may have had to hop off. So I will take that question and I will direct it to Beth via email, and we'll get back to you all.
Okay. And then Barb, somebody was asking the lobby day on Maid. What would that entail if it's a virtual lobby day? So what do you expect that to be?
Well, what I understand is when you register at that league, then they will send you information, and I believe they're asking you to take action on Friday. So that is Compassionate Choices, the organization that we work with on medical aid and dying, and actually Death with Dignity is also a part of that same coalition. So
Okay,
that's what I think.
Okay, and then for Barb or for Erica, maybe, do we know what the objections are to the New York State ERA?
Well, yeah. We know that there are many people who don't believe that abortion or transgender care are things that the state should be supporting. And I think those are the groups that nobody has really come out against it really publicly, but I expect that they will.
Erica, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's great.
Okay.
As Barb said, we'll definitely have, I guess I do have something to add. As Barb said, we'll definitely see more organized efforts come out. But that's, what we expect it to be. Last session, before it was passed legislatively in the Assembly and Senate, we saw some pushback to some pushback from religious organizations in particular, talking about a few of these issues. So more to come, but.
Okay, thanks. And Judy, there is a question, but I do not think you can take care of it here. I think that, let's see, is it Jane who asked this? Jane Colvin is asking this question. And I think if you want to write something up, Judy, we can stick it in the neck, share it with people. Because just knowing my conversations with you, this is a huge question. It is, what would happen to Medicare funding if the New York Healthcare Act were passed in New York State?
We'd still have it. The answer is we'd still have it.
Oh, all right. So, okay. Well,
All
I
federal
guess,
funding that currently comes into New York would continue coming in, and including Medicare, Medicaid, and if you have long-term care insurance, you would no longer have to pay premiums, but you would still have it. It would go to New York Health. And so long-term care is covered. Yes, that is part of the bill.
okay. I figured that was going to be a longer discussion, but great. Thanks, Judy. I think it's 11:30, Erica. So I don't know. I think I got most of the big questions that were in the chat. Is there anything else, Erica, that you wanted to talk about or mention?
Thanks, Laura. I just want to again reiterate and give a huge thanks to the issue specialists and to all of you who joined us today. This is the first step in starting to learn how you can really take action and be an impactful part of New York State politics this coming session. So thank you all so much. Before we wrap up, I do want to hand it back over to Laura. But before I do that, I'll say that if you have any follow-up questions that weren't answered on the call today, feel free to reach out to me directly and I will get you to the person who can answer that question. So I will put my email in the chat. And with that, I will hand it to Laura.
Thanks, Erica. I just want to say thank you to all of our issue specialists, our committee chairs, and all of you who have worked so hard on all of these issues, and to Erica. And hopefully you've been suitably impressed by what was presented today and all the issues and all the things that we are following. And this is just our advocacy agenda. Think about what else the State League does. So I do have to just put out there that we can't do this without funding. So if you can, please support the State League so that we can continue to have these programs. We can continue to do as much work as we do, both in advocacy and voter services and in all our educational programs. But we just cannot do it without sufficient funding. So I am putting the donate link in the chat, and I'm hoping you'll all go online and donate whatever you can. Even a little amount from everybody would make a big difference. So please help us continue to do as much work as we do. But thank you for all of the work that you all do as well. So have a good weekend and thanks for joining us on a Saturday.
Yes. Thank you all.
Take care. Enjoy the weekend.